Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. I am so excited to introduce you to Mary Womack. Mary is the owner and winemaker at Damsel Cellars in Woodinville, Washington. She began her love affair with wine while working in Seattle restaurants. And when the opportunity came to volunteer and learn more about wine, she jumped at the chance. Now, I'll let her tell you the full story. It sounds much better coming from her. But do know I'm a big fan of Damsel wines, so much so that I've included a stop at their tasting room on both of my Woodinville day retreats. And will likely continue to do so as those grow. Be sure to listen until the end, when Mary shares an exciting partnership for Damsel with the lead singer of Train. How crazy is that? All right, without further ado, let's get into the interview. Super excited to talk with you. I first heard your story from Rachel when I came in before one of the wine retreats, and she had convinced me to stay to do a tasting that day, and then I did it one the next day. Awesome. Not mad about it, that's for sure. And then she was telling me about you, and I was like, oh, she would be the perfect person to talk to. I would love to learn more. You know, I love learning from winemakers and your experience and how you do it. So I was really glad that you wanted to come on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here and be one of the first interviewers on the podcast. This is really exciting.
Thank you.
You're launching this whole project. It's great.
Yes, thank you. So why don't we start with, do you just want to tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
I am Mary Womack, and I am the owner and winemaker at Damsel Cellars. And I started Damsel Cellars after being in the restaurant business for a number of years. Really kind of falling in love with food and wine, working in restaurants in Seattle. You know, had a lot of friends who grew up in the restaurant industry and have now, you know, become food and bev managers, have places of their own, open their own restaurants. So just really fell in love with that whole hospitality scene. And that's kind of my background. I grew up here in Washington, just down in Renton, went to Kent Ridge High School, go Chargers, went to the University of Washington, go Huskies, and kind of just moved around living in a bunch of different neighborhoods in Seattle. So kind of that native Washingtonian vibe. Never really wanted to leave here. It's such a beautiful place in the Northwest. You know, we're so close to everything, and the food is great. The food scene is awesome. And then to discover that we have all of this agricultural land and all of these wonderful things that we can grow in the state too. And, you know, wine being one of those really amazing top crops. Like we're just spoiled out here. We're just spoiled. So
I agree. I mean, so I'm originally from the Midwest, and coming out here, I mean, I'm amazed every day at the beauty that is Washington. I mean, my husband grew up in California, so he's a little more used to the mountains, but like every day, whenever I can see them, I'm like, look, the mountains, aren't they pretty? Aren't they beautiful?
Mountains.
He's like, yes, Haley, there are mountains here. I'm like, but they're so pretty. And it is, yeah, Washington is great food, like you said, and especially around the Seattle area here. And of course, great wine, which is what we're talking about. So was there like a specific moment that like sparked your interest in wine, or made you want to, you know, go this in depth into wine?
I think there wasn't really an aha moment that I can pinpoint. It was more this sort of slow burn, this like gradual building of interest over time, just being involved with restaurants. You know, I had a food and wine pairing and got to go to a lot of like cool industry things, and was drinking some really nice bottles of wine and visiting friends at other restaurants. And there was a Tite Syrah and some braised lamb that was really kind of one of those moments where you're like, oh, this really does elevate each other. This is what's happening, you know, and it kind of all came together. And looking back, I can see where there are those little points of inflection where there were moments or special food and wine pairings or a particular trip or a particular vineyard visit. But it cumulatively kind of grew over the years where Once my partner had 4 restaurants. So once the last one was sold, I actually was doing real estate. I have my real estate license as well. So did that for like 19 years of residential real estate sales. And when the market collapsed, funny, that was like the same year that the last restaurant was sold. So I didn't have anything to do on the weekends. And I thought, oh, this might be a really good time to kind of explore this wine thing a little bit more. And I started volunteering at the tasting room at Obeliska when they had one wine. They had just their Cabernet. They didn't have any the rest of the wines yet. So I got really familiar with that one Cabernet. And then after that, everybody out here just is such a great networker and a connector in Woodinville. And if you are really excited about wine, they'll put you in the right place to succeed, or they'll at least point your feet in the right direction. They'll put you on the path. And I wanted to see what was going on during harvest and production and just learn more. And so I went and did harvest and kind of just started volunteering at Bear Winery when Leroy Radford was the winemaker there, and Erica Orr was on board at that point as well. And also Kevin White was helping Leroy at that point as an assistant, which was great. So if anyone's familiar with Kevin White Winery, he's one of my neighbors up here in the Warehouse District as well. He and I made a keg of rosé together. That was the very first fermentation that I ever did, which was hilarious. So to this day, I made rosé with Kevin White.
Yeah, I love it.
But once I saw what was going on with production and like all the equipment and fermenting bins and the grapes coming in, and once I saw all of that, I think that was more like the light bulb clicked and I went, oh, I need a winery.
I need to do this.
That's what people wake up one day and you just say, of course, I need a winery. That's a logical next step. You see a fermentation, and you're like, I gotta have one.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I know nothing about it, didn't go to school for it, really just worked my butt off to kind of put myself in the right position. Again, reached out to people, said, hey, I need to learn how to make wine. I'm going to have a winery one day, and I need to learn how to do that. And so if you could just tell me, like, anybody looking for help? And sure enough, I was pointed over to Darby English at Darby Winery, and he was looking for somebody to help run his 2 tasting rooms and also, provide some cellar help and kind of, work in the winery itself. So I spoke with him. I said, I'm going to have a winery in a few years. I'm going to be your competition, but if you're cool with that, maybe we can work together. And it worked into almost an apprenticeship. I really learned so much from that job. I became his assistant winemaker, and, we were crushing probably 85 tons from maybe 10 or 12 different vineyards at that point, lots of different varietals that we were working with. So it was a great learning experience.
And you were doing that like while running the tasting rooms, right? Like the way I heard the story was basically like he was looking for front of house and you were like, great, I can do that, but I need you to help me in the back of house. Like I want to learn how to make the wine as well.
Yep, that's really what happened. Like I said, it was an apprenticeship where I probably didn't deserve the title of assistant winemaker that first year. And the title was probably more compensation for pay too. Like it was so much work. And so we would do cellar work, and then I would, scuttle off to go work in the tasting rooms and manage the tasting rooms and move a bunch of wine around and come back and do some more work in the cellar. And harvest was always really crazy. So, I always looked like a mess because I'd be covered in grapes and I'd just be running off to work in the tasting room. But it was such an amazing learning experience. And I don't think I could have done it any other way. Just because I came to it so late, I didn't want to waste time. Like I have to go to school and I have to do an internship and then I have to do, and I just saw this process dragging on for like 10 years. So I was like, okay, how do we shorten that? How do we just somehow bootstrap a winery, make it work? And I got really, really lucky with a lot of people who supported me out here in Woodinville, my family. Everything just kind of all fell into place. I just worked really hard and kept saying yes to things. So, I left Darby after 4 years there. So 2015 was the last year that I worked there. And he was kind enough to let me start making wine on my own. So by the time I left, I had a couple of vintages bottled, ready to go. The label was going. I had told every single person that ever came into his tasting room what I was doing. So I had a lot of support from all those kind people who are still, some of them in my wine club, still friends to this day. So yeah, I then actually tucked in with Lisa Callan. We shared a space for a while as our two wineries were growing. And then in 2020, I moved into the space that I'm currently in the production space. And we've just kind of been expanding ever since. We're growing every single year. So things are going well.
Oh, that's so exciting. And there's a couple things that I wanted to touch on. So one thing that you talked about once you realized you wanted to have a winery, and I love that you like had the confidence of just like, I'm going to have a winery. I just like teach me how to do this. Like I want to learn how to do this for my winery that I'm going to do. Did that confidence ever waver? Was there ever a time like, like you said, it was really hard work that you were just like, oh crap, what did I get myself into? What am I doing? Or was that confidence was always there and you knew where you were headed the whole time?
I would love to say that this was totally planned, but it wasn't at all. It really just came out of opportunity, and a lot of it out of necessity, where, I think a lot of times in the wine business, you really are just a problem solver, whether it is logistics, whether it's like when to pick the grapes. Like a lot of times you're just kind of solving problems. You're working, with a product that Mother Nature is a very fickle business partner. And so like, what's the weather going to do? Is it going to snow in the pass? Are we going to get the fruit in on time? Like once we get the fruit in, what kind of conditions is it in? And so I think a lot of times I had no idea what to expect, no idea about how much things cost. Everything is like a $10,000 check for some reason.
Oof.
So I kind of think that I benefited from not knowing, and maybe the confidence just came because, the ignorance is bliss saying,
Right,
like, I just didn't know how hard it was going to be. I didn't know how much it was going to cost. I didn't know how any of these things were done. And so on the one hand, I didn't know how hard it was going to be. So I didn't anticipate any of these big problems happening. And I just, kind of just rolled with it. And I don't know if it was confidence or craziness.
Maybe a healthy combination of both. Yeah.
You just get through it. So it really, it worked out great. But yeah, very unplanned until we got to a point we were making, a couple thousand cases and really started getting a few vintages under your belt and really understanding like what the quality of the grapes were when you're normally harvesting from these different vineyards. The relationships with those vineyards are solid. You've worked with them for a number of years. So, probably about year 6, 7, things kind of settle down. You're like, okay, this is the path. This path looks normal. I feel like now we're getting this under control. Sure. So with more of that consistency, I think the confidence was building just based strictly on repetition and skills and just growing and learning how to run a company.
I wanted to ask too. So obviously winemaking is a really complicated task. There's a lot to it that I think, when you're drinking the wine, you don't realize how much work had to go into making that bottle of wine. And I'm curious from your perspective, what would you say is the hardest part of winemaking?
I think the hardest part for me was learning to be patient. I think with so many things, even if we just took like the beverage industry, for example, like you can make a beer in a couple of weeks, and you can try out new recipes and you can invent and do these new and exciting things. And you kind of know what you have almost immediately. It's just a much faster feedback loop, where with wine, I'm not a very patient person. I'm generally curious. I get kind of bored easily. And so I really enjoy like getting the feedback and like making some moves and getting things done. And so waiting for wine to move through these phases, especially red wine, white wine, I've decided I love white wine because it's, you can really just kind of get in there, get it done and kind of figure out what you're going to have fairly soon. Sure. Compared to red wine. But the evolution of the red wine, oh God, it's so long. And I get very impatient. And so I think over time, learning to let the wine just do what it's going to do for a while and knowing not to like getting into the barrels, every month or so, just, I got to taste it. I got to find out what's going on, what's happening. How are you evolving? What's going on? And some of the wines now after time, like you kind of know when and what you have at certain points. Like Syrah always tastes good. Syrah just is like this continual upslope. You're like, yay, you're just so pretty. You're getting prettier and prettier. Cabernet, I feel like you're just testing for flaws for the first year, and then it kind of pops up and you're like, oh, hi, friend, I recognize you. But for like the first 12 months, you're just trying to taste for flaws. For Malbec is like a teenager. Malbec, I don't know who's coming out of the barrel on any given morning. It could be the best of times or the worst of times. It was almost like it's beautiful going into the barrel and it tasted like, blueberry pie. And you're like, oh, I'm the best winemaker ever. Look at me go. And then, you're topping or racking and you taste it again and it tastes terrible. It's just like tannic grape juice. There's nothing interesting happening. You're just like, oh, I've screwed it up. I better blend it with something, but it's like this little roller coaster. So learning to be patient with the wine, I think is my greatest challenge personally, is just learning to be patient and learning to let the wine evolve over time and give it that space without trying to micromanage it.
Gosh, yeah, that would be, I'm with you. I'm a very impatient person. It'd be so hard, like you said, with like the Malbec or any of them, you have a taste and you're like, oh, that's not quite right. Let me fix it. Versus like,
Right.
it sounds like a lot of times fixing it is just leaving it be. It's gonna fix itself. You have to like, and then there's the trust factor, which adds in there. And you're like, you're telling me I just have to trust that this wine is going to
Right. Yeah.
thing?
Oh, it's
Like,
going to be fine. I don't love it
okay.
right now, but it's going to get there. It's
Yeah.
going to be fine.
Oh, I love it. Well, talking about all the different wines you make, you have a great variety at Damsel. How do you decide which grapes to use and like which wines to create?
I think first and foremost, to make something delicious, you actually have to like it yourself. So I started with things that I like to drink that were, coming from reputable vineyards and that I thought that I could execute well. And as your skills grow, as you continue to develop your style, I think that becomes an easier choice of what you will or won't include in your portfolio, like what you want to make. But I love Rhone varietals. So I started with Syrah. And I thought, okay, Syrah is very forgiving. There's all kinds of fun, playful things you could do with it. So I'm not going to get bored. You can co-ferment it. You can do whole cluster fermentation. You can destem it, add stems back to the ferment. Like, it's just so fun and playful. And so I'm like, okay, this is what I like. I'm passionate about it. I like to drink it. Let's start with that. So I think kind of maintaining that sort of curiosity about the variety that you work with, being excited to work with that particular grape, or having a really great, vineyard connection or a vineyard manager that you can work with that's also really excited about that particular grape, I think always helps. So as far as my choices, that's sort of been the guiding principles. Like, what am I excited about? What do I want to drink? What do I think I can execute with some passion and some excitement?
Do you ever find yourself standing in front of the wine aisle at the grocery store, feeling completely lost and overwhelmed? Don't worry, you're not alone. But what if I told you that I have a way to transform the wine aisle from overwhelming into an endless sea of joy and discovery? And it involves drinking wine and joining the most welcoming and fun community. In my Court Crew Virtual Tasting Club, we're all about exploring new and exciting wines in a fun and supportive community. No more feeling intimidated or stuck in a rut of buying the same bottle of wine. Each month, we explore 2 new wines so you can broaden your palate and explore new flavors. Not only will we taste these wines together, but we'll learn about where the wines come from, essentially traveling the world all through the wine in our glass. Come join the Court Crew and you'll have the opportunity to taste new wines, meet winemakers and other wine professionals, and connect with like-minded wine lovers from all over the world. Imagine the joy of discovering a new favorite wine and being able to confidently choose a bottle that you know you'll love. So, why not join us? Head to my website at corkandfizz.com/thecourtcrew to sign up. And don't forget to use code WINE101 to get your first month free. And now, back to the show. So talking about the vineyards, right? And I know, any winemaker will tell you like the best wines have to come from great grapes, right? You can't necessarily make a great wine out of not so great grapes. And so I'm so curious with like How do you make connections with those growers? You know, we talked about like Dick Bushy of Bushy Vineyards and then the late Tom Alberg of Stillwater Creek. Like to me, those are like top names. And I think of those vineyards and they're at the very top. How do you make those connections with those people?
Luckily, through working with Darby,
Mm.
he was in a couple of these vineyards already. And so driving out and kind of having that introduction from him and meeting the vineyard managers and really working with the grapes and spending some time out visiting with them was really important. So with Stillwater Creek Vineyard, their director of the vineyard out there now is Ed Kelly. He's been there, gosh, almost 10 years now. And he came up from California. He was a plant pathologist for years down. He calls Mount Veeder his mountain. It's pretty cute. But with numerous trips out there, really just making that connection and building that friendship. And Ed has turned out to be like one of my favorite people in the whole business. He's just a great person to work with, incredibly supportive, and really, I mean, goes to a lot of trouble to educate winemakers on, you know, the plant aspects of what's happening in the vineyard and what's happening and what he's doing from a technical standpoint to really enhance and give you the best fruit that you can possibly work with. So, you know, obviously those introductions when I was first getting started were very important. Sometimes, like expanding into new vineyards, either I reach out to vineyard directors based on, you know, wines that I've tried from some of my fellow winemakers who are just doing an amazing job. And if they make a delicious wine and they're like, ooh, you know, this Semillon from Deneen Vineyards is amazing, then, you know, you can reach out and kind of make those contacts and try and plead your case if they have any grapes left. Maybe, you know, bring a bottle or two of what you do, try to
Right.
impress them and be like, oh, look what I can do. I'll treat your grapes so nicely. It's like a little date. It's, you know, you're trying to impress them. But yeah, Dick and Luann are very special as well. They're some of the best people again in the business. And they were one of the first families to plant grapes out in Yakima Valley ages ago. So they have been involved for a very long time in the business. And meeting them and working with them was really incredibly special. They don't have to sell to small winemakers like myself. They could probably simplify their life and sell to maybe 5 wineries, but instead they go out of their way to really find out like who are the up and comers, who can we work with, who can we support. And having their vineyard designation on my label has been huge for my winery. So making those vineyard connections, you know, recently we started working maybe 5 years ago with Discovery Vineyard. So that's Milo and Kay May and their son Oliver managing that vineyard. And Discovery has become one of my favorite places. And just knowing that these families work so hard to not only care for their vineyards, but to care about the product that you're making with those grapes. It's really a great partnership. Dick Boucher always says there's 3 different things. Like you have the terroir and you have nature and you have what the grape is doing. Then you have what the vineyard manager or, you know, vineyard director is doing, the farmers. And then you have the input of the winemakers on the final side. So it's this nice third that I get. And then I share 2/3 of the credit with the other entities. So yeah, those partnerships are crucial to the success of my business and the overall taste of the wine. So
Absolutely. And I love the idea too that like, you know, now that we know the families behind a lot of these vineyards too, that when you buy a bottle of Damsel Cellars wine, right, we're not just supporting Damsel Cellars, we're also supporting those vineyards as well and you know, those farmers that do create those amazing grapes.
absolutely.
So I'm curious, so right now you currently purchase fruit from vineyards. Do you ever want to own your own vineyard? Would that be something you could ever see happening, or do you think you'd prefer to stay on the winemaking side?
I have a degree in landscape design and horticulture. Like I went back to school and got a degree.
Nice.
So while I understand the plants, it is a totally different skill set. It is absolutely a totally different animal. And, you know, I feel like I have so much to learn just on the wine making side, like what I'm doing now. I still learn so much every single year that I would love to. The idea of my own vineyard is incredibly tempting. I would love it. especially just based on the amount of control you would have, start to finish, pick dates, like tending to the vines, knowing exactly what the grapes are doing on any given day. So from a control standpoint and just the romantic idea of my own vineyard, that sounds delightful. But wearing the hat and doing the actual farming, that seems a little daunting. So in
Yeah.
theory, yes, I'm a
Right.
big yes to my own vineyard in theory, but the execution of that seems a little overwhelming at this point.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair and really like says a lot about like the way you're thinking about this and your wines because you still want, you want to make sure you can dedicate that time to creating those wines and like you said continuing to learn. And while the vineyard sounds great, like you also have these people who are amazing at it, right? And might as well like let them do their magic so you can do your magic in the winemaking area.
Yeah, I think for the time being, I'm perfectly happy staying in my lane and letting the experts do their thing.
Yes. Yes, I love it. So going back a little bit to the wine, I know with your background in restaurants, you've mentioned that a major goal of yours is making wine that pairs well with food. And I'm curious, what does that mean to you? What is it about a wine that makes it food friendly?
In a lot of cases, I mean, there are beautiful wines that are being made all across the state. Some of those wines are delicious, but they're heavy and they're, either very tannic or very spicy, or they're, potentially don't have a lot of acid, or, all of these things, they could be incredibly delicious, but may not be super food friendly. They may just like pound your food into submission with all of their beautiful, big, bold flavors. That to me sounds more like I need like a book and my
Sure.
blankie, a fire, and I should just like cocoon with one of those big, beautiful wines. But from my standpoint, as far as the pairing aspect, there's a lot of creativity, I think, that's happening now. We're getting so far away from that old adage of red wine, red meat, white wine, fish or poultry. Like, I feel like as people's food tastes change and their experience with wine changes, that people are getting very daring. So I think the ability to make a wine that both has a really nice balance of aromatics and fruit flavors and enough acid to really give it a lift at the back of the palate can be really, really fun. A lot of times, though, I think, we have these like great bridge ingredients. And as people are becoming more experimental in their cooking with vegetables and, just chucking anything on the grill now, like there's just so much flexibility that to me, the right bottle of wine, hopefully a beautifully balanced wine with great aromatics, great fruit, great tannin, great acid, all of those things will elevate your dining experience. And so I think, as people are being more creative with their food and, maybe cooking more at home, maybe they, embraced their COVID inner chef
Yeah.
or inner baker. I know my brother got in that whole sourdough.
Nice. Oh yeah, there was a sourdough phase, that's for sure.
But as people have kind of come out of that, I think we've sort of taken away this idea that there are so many options now with cooking and different styles of food and different types of preparations that I think that really strict pairing needs to be broken up and really just needs to be more about sharing a bottle outside with your friends in the beautiful weather, and whatever's on the grill, you grab a great bottle that you love just to share with them. Obviously, there are very good reasons to pair certain wines together with certain foods. For example, we make 100% Mourvèdre, which tends to be somewhat tannic as far as Rhone varietals go. It's a little bit more tannic and has really kind of peppery flavors. So that tends to work better with a fattier food or a food that has more protein or a dish that is more protein based, just to kind of settle down those tannins and bind with those tannins. So you're not getting that big shot to the face and like that grippiness.
Yes, yes.
So there are some good rules about fats and tannins and acid and salt and all of those good things. But as far as that strict pairing again, where you're doing red wine, red meat, and
Right.
so on and so forth, I think that especially here in Washington, where we have so many things to choose from, that you can do some really spectacular pairings. Like go crazy. Go crazy.
Yes. Yes. I love it. It's a big like thing of mine to like, I always encourage people, that you're always willing to try new foods, right? Or like when you're cooking, you'll try something new, or you go to a new restaurant, you're down to try a new dish, but like it can be scary picking up a new bottle of wine. It's like just see it the same way. Right? You're getting to try something new and have something fun with it. You might not love it. You might like some bits of it and not others, and that's okay. That's exactly what it is with food, but it's very seldom that you hate a new dish, right? And so I feel like it falls on the same path with wine. And so I did like what you mentioned too about like it sounds like, typically a food pairing wine is generally something there's a little more acidity there. I think that's something I've always said too, is like, got a little acidity to match with the food. And then it's balanced, and it's not going to overshadow the food. Essentially, it's going to be a good partner.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay. So talking about your wines, I'm going to ask you a very difficult question because I'm going to make you choose between your babies. But I'm curious for somebody listening right now, and they wanted to, buy a few bottles to try what Damsel Cellars wine is all about. Let's say 3 wines would you recommend they try?
So right now, with the weather as beautiful as it is, finally, I feel like we went from winter like straight into summer. I don't feel like we had a transitional spring phase. I feel like we're like right in the center of white wine time. At least I'm drinking a lot of white wine. So I would suggest our 2022 Marsanne from Boucher Vineyards. So it's a really lovely Marsanne. We barrel ferment it. So it has a nice creamy body to it, but then we tank it up in stainless steel. So it finishes like with this really zesty kind of crisp citrusy finish. It just has a really lovely body. And if you like doing like cold soba noodles or any of like cold Asian salads right now, or any spicy foods, it is really awesome with like Thai and Viet pairings. So, any of those cold like cucumber salads, if you're doing like spring rolls in peanut sauce, like all those fun things. So I would do that one. We have our 2020 Grenache right now. So if you're looking for something that is a lighter, more medium-bodied red, this would be a good one. 2020, though, it was a little bit hotter year, so she's got a little spice to her. She's a little spicy. So a lighter-bodied, spicy little Grenache is always fun. And then we also have our Stillwater Creek Syrah, which is our flagship wine. It's a more medium-bodied Syrah. It's not a super heavy or tannic Syrah. It has really nice, clean flavors, lots of blackberry and some pepper. And if you're doing like any kind of grilling, you're doing any barbecue, it's especially good with barbecue. So if you're out and about, in your backyard, just throwing things on the grill, now is a good time to get that bottle as well.
Cool. I love it. I also love that 2 of the bottles you mentioned are bottles I've purchased from you guys. I think I've had the Marsanne and the Stillwater Creek Syrah, and I absolutely love both of those. So highly recommend either of those. And I think they can work well with any season. I know, we were mentioning like the Marsanne feels great for summer right now, but honestly, I was like having a big kick of like the Rhone whites, the Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier styles over the winter. It just like seemed to work really well when I wanted a little bit brighter, but I didn't want like the high acidity of like a Sauvignon Blanc or something. I just, wanted that to brighten up my winter a little bit.
And honestly, like if you're doing, talking about food pairings again, when you're doing like contrasting versus complementary flavors, a white wine in the winter with like your cream-based soups or your really like heavy mushroom risotto or anything like that, sometimes that like bright pop of acid is a really awesome contrasting flavor to kind of wake your palate up a little bit and cut through some of those like creamy, heavier dishes. So
yeah, absolutely. No, I do a lot of that. So I've asked you about the wines you currently have, but I always love to ask winemakers about, is there anything new and exciting that you're working on or anything you'd like to share?
We actually just this past year started making Sauvignon Blanc for the first time, which was really exciting. We're partnering with McNary Vineyard, which is out in Horse Heaven Hills. Okay. And they're part of the Sustainable Washington program. So this is a program that's been launched. They have similar programs in Oregon and California, but this is really a great sort of sustainable farming, living wages kind of practice where There's multiple different categories taken into account before you can get this certification. So not only is it like regenerative planting and being salmon safe and sustainable irrigation practices, all of those things, and also taking into account vineyard workers. This particular vineyard actually has housing on site for their vineyard workers, and you have to pay a livable wage. So all of those things kind of are encompassing that sustainable Washington piece. So partnering with some of those vineyards that are really taking that extra step to be mindful about how we're treating the land and how we're treating some of these agricultural products is awesome. Other than that, we just recently launched a wine that we're making for a foundation, Duke's Damsel on a Train. It sounds crazy, I know, but we're making Cabernet from Candy Mountain for Duke's restaurants. This is also involving Pat Monahan of Train, the band, and then Damsel Cellars as well. So we're all doing a foundation that is donating money to saving salmon. So the wine was made and released in April, and this is going to be continuous going forward. It's available at all of the Duke's restaurants, and money from the sale of that wine is being donated to 3 different philanthropies, I should say. So there's Save Our Wild Salmon, the Wild Fish Conservancy, and Long Live the Kings. So that's something fun that we're doing.
Oh my gosh, how exciting. How did Train get connected? How did that happen?
We have COVID to thank for this. COVID and golf courses. So essentially what happened was investors that we have at Damsel, Mike Howden and Heather Anderson, they live just down on Lake Sammamish, and Pat and his wife Amber just happened to be their neighbors. And so they have kids that are the same age too. And so I think they just bonded over wine during COVID. Everybody was like out drinking in the afternoons, getting to know your neighbors. And so they forged a friendship. And then there was everyone from Duke's, the Moss Grips were out golfing. And I guess they know Pat. They're all at a golf club together. All of this, it is a very strange way that the world works sometimes and comes together for these projects. But as it turns out, it was a great partnership. We've got a couple vintages ready to go. We just released one, like I said, back at the end of April. So if you want to support wild salmon and keeping our wild salmon safe, you can go to Duke's restaurant and buy a bottle of our Upriver Red, and you will be helping to save our salmon.
Oh, that's so fun. I love that your 2 new things are very much like very eco-focused and using wine to do good, right? And I love the mention of sustainability. That's something I've mentioned before on here. And just because sometimes you don't know what that word means. And I like that, Washington, I love their new sustainability focus and their new certifications that don't just include eco-friendly stuff, but also the taking care of the workers, which is really amazing, which makes me want to buy a bottle of wine even more when I know it's supporting that.
Well, and the farmers that we work with and the people that have been on these properties, on these vineyards for 30, 40 years. I mean, no one's going to take better care of their land than they do. Most everyone that we work with, everyone's really committed to making sure that this goes on for generations. And obviously everyone's very mindful of that. So I'm glad that we have the partnerships that we do. And we're working with vineyards that are incredibly mindful of taking care of the land.
Yeah. So I have my last little speed round. So they're just fun little questions. You don't have to think too much about it. The reason I call it a speed round is don't think too hard. You probably have multiple answers for these questions. Okay. So don't worry about it too much. It's just meant to just be curious, just ask you in the wine world. So first question is favorite wine at the moment.
I'm drinking a lot of Central Coast Pinots for some reason. Yeah, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, drinking some Central Coast Pinots.
Oh, I love those. I was just down in Santa Barbara. My husband and I went in April, and God, that's another beautiful region, just like Walla Walla too.
Oh, yeah.
But okay, so that's favorite wine. Favorite wine region you've ever visited?
I actually really love the Central Coast.
Believe you, it is so pretty.
Like that's just I guess I'm in a phase. I love Paso. I love going to Paso Robles. We go almost every year. It's just like a home away from home, and it's close to the ocean, and then like you can drive 20 minutes or 40 minutes and be in wine country. Like it's the best of both worlds. It's ocean and vineyards.
Yes. No, I love it. I love it. Okay. How about wine region you'd like to visit?
I want to go to the Algarve in Portugal.
Oh, very
Yeah.
cool. Where is that?
It's on the southern tip of Portugal, so right around the Mediterranean there.
Okay.
The Azores are kind of off. You can go to the Azores and little islands over there. So I would like to go to the Algarve. Yeah, do southern Portugal. Sounds fun.
Fun. Okay. How about favorite wine and food pairing?
I think any slow braised lamb and Syrah might be. Yeah, I would eat that anytime, all year round.
I love it. Okay. Last one is best bottle, or you can say style of wine too, under $15.
Ooh. Well, so my neighbor down the street, Palmum Cellars. So Javier Alfonso is the winemaker down there. He makes a brand called Idilico that you can kind of find out in stores that's a little bit more available. I think Esquin carries a lot of their stuff. He makes an Albarino that is delicious. I think it's like the $15 to $17 range. So yeah, his Albarino is very tasty. And then I think any New Zealand, any like Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc right now, you can find some really nice ones, I think, for under 15.
Yeah, those are some of my go-tos. One of my first favorite wines, like before I got into the world of wine, was a Nobilo Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough.
Okay.
Like, just a good go-to.
Yeah, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, it's very reasonable, very easy to drink, especially this time of year. See, I'm really focused on the white wines for some reason.
I don't blame you. The more I've gotten into wine, the more I've honestly like started to love white wines. I'll still enjoy my reds, but like I think I've got a new appreciation for the white wines.
Nice.
All right. Well, you made it through the speed round. Before we go, I just wanted to thank you again for coming on and chatting with us. I feel like I learned so much and it was just a great conversation. Where can people buy your wines if they are interested in trying?
You can always visit us at one of our 2 tasting room locations in Woodinville. We have a location up in Artisan Hill, which is our original winery and production facility. We also have a new tasting room in the Hollywood Hills district, open daily for tastings. You can find us online at damselcellars.com, and you can follow us and find out about new fun events and some of our new wine releases on our social. Just at Damsel Cellars everywhere.
Okay. And then lastly, you have a coupon code to share for the month of July. Just use code July, correct? And that's 10% off on the wines.
Yeah, you can purchase online, enter the code, and then you can select whether or not you want us to ship. We do have a flat rate shipping fee for up to a case, or you can come visit us and pick up your wine order at either of our tasting rooms.
Awesome. I love it. And that'll be good the month of July in 2023. So for anybody listening in the future, definitely still recommend checking out Damsel Cellars. The coupon is just good until July. So, all right. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for coming on, Mary. I really, like I said, I love talking to winemakers and especially, women winemakers and someone like you who, like you said, you dove into it and didn't look back.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. If you loved it as much as I did, I would absolutely love it if you could take a quick second to rate it and leave a review. And if you know a wine lover in your life that would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. It would mean the world to me. I highly recommend trying some Damsel Cellars wine, whether it be at their tasting room or one of their 2 tasting rooms now in Woodinville if you're near the area, or by shopping online. And remember, you can head to damselcellars.com and use code JULY, July, for 10% off through the month of July in 2023. In next week's episode, I'll be sharing my story and how I fell into the world of wine. Thank you again for listening, and if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and joining an incredible community of wine lovers, be sure to sign up for my virtual tasting club, The Cork Crew. Use code WINE101 to get your first month absolutely free. Cheers!